Hi, this is Adele, and in today's video, I have something I want you to try to frame your painting with space. I'm going to show you my abstract painting with lots of layers, pretty much the whole painting from start to finish. So stay tuned to the end because it's the only way you're going to see the final piece. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button and the like button below so you don't miss out on any of my weekly art tutorials. Please comment. I love to hear from you, and I make a point to answer every single comment myself. So thanks for joining, and let's get started. I've got my palette out, and here I go with, I am covering over a painting. Well, it's actually not a painting. It's some paper that I glued to it. It's an antique paper, but I want to do something else. So I have put some tape around it where the paper was and covering it up with the dark color because under all my neutrals, whites, beiges, and taupes, I always have a dark undertone. And this is raw umber. Now, this is an interesting thing I wanted to show you, which is putting a painting in the middle of another painting. So you have this space, like I spoke about in the intro, around the piece. You do not have to go from top to bottom and side to side on every single painting. And this is one way that you can put a smaller piece and attach it to a larger piece to get a bigger painting. And so I cover the whole thing up, and then this is just the very first layer of redoing something. And so you just cover it up. And then you let it dry. And so then because I'm going to do several neutrals or whites, it's not just stark white. So I mix a warm white and a cool white, and I put all the whites together. So I'm going to do like a cool white with the blue, the ultramarine blue, and then I'm going to do a warm white with the yellow ochre that I have there. So you'll see me mixing and adjusting a little bit. It's a little bit too cool, so I'm going to warm it down with the raw umber and with my palette that I love so much, palette knife. So I just keep mixing till it's still in the white, but if you put several of the whites with a slight different tint together, then you have a very interesting combination of neutrals on your canvas. It's going to be much more exciting to the eye instead of just putting a white on. If you do put just stark white, it's very bluish and cool. So I usually don't put stark white on except for as highlights. So it takes me a little while to mix all the colors on the canvas, on the palette. I like to mix most of my colors ahead of time so I can see what they look like and adjust them accordingly. And that way, when you're in the middle of painting, you don't have to stop and mix a color. You've got them all out there. It's a lot easier. And then on the last one that you see, I'm doing white and adding unbleached titanium, which I love. It's a warm white as well, but again, different than yellow ochre. Then I move my raw umber out of the way, the palette, so that I can see all the whites together and see the subtleties. This painting is about a lot of subtleties. So I'm going to do a lot of close-ups. If you see that you can't tell much or see the difference when they're on the canvas, wait, because I go up very close with the camera. And when I first started doing this, I thought, when I first put this white on, I said, oh, that's way too white. I wish I had actually made it a little warmer or cooler, whichever one this is. And so I will do that later, and I'll show you a little trick on how I do that. But I'm just spreading it on and keeping it all wet. It's a pretty small piece. The outside of the canvas is a 36 by 36 inches. So this piece is a couple inch smaller than that. And I put several of the different mixed whites together and they'll blend on there, and then it's really nice. And then when the white is still wet with the dark undertone, I go in with the back end of just, one of my pencils or something sharp and just make lines and just make marks. And what this does is it's going to give it texture that it wouldn't have otherwise. You can't do this if the top layer is dry though, so you have to do it when it's wet, and you want a contrasting undertone to make it work. And now I'm using my brush very lightly to just smooth out or cover up some of the lines, and some of them will stay. Just haphazardly, there's no plan, just to give some interest as one of the layers. This is a multi-layered piece. Now I'm going back in over it with the same type of the back end of a pencil or something to make a mark. And this one I'm doing a lot lighter. So I'm going to have the variety of line from the heavier one, which is the first one, and then the second one, which is the lighter pressure. And then again, I'm going over very lightly to basically push back some of it and let some of it stay out. So you can see some of the lines, and some of the lines you'll see like a ghost of it. It's right underneath. Mixing some of my medium. It helps the paints go farther and makes them a little bit creamier. I really like to use it in almost all the mixtures that I use. Now I'm going to go over that first multi-white background with some other very subtle colors, but in like a light way. Just haphazardly again with the brush, letting the paint kind of guide me, and you'll see in a moment more up close so that you can see how this is contrasting. There's some lines. I do it with a lot of water, so there's some drips that I didn't, I'm not planning on anything. I'm just seeing what happens and then let that guide me to the next step. But as I do all these different layers, each one adds some kind of texture and interest. If I just didn't have any of the layers, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting. Okay, you can see a little bit up close now. I made it a little darker taupe than the dark white, and I wanted some lines there, so I did some drips. Now this is titanium white, and I put it straight on with a brush, and I'm just twisting it to get a lot of the kind of the thickness. I want to get some thickness there. And very subtle, warmish tone over the white. And I decided to go outside of I love to go outside of the border because it makes the shape or the line much more interesting than if you just feel confined to stay within the 4 parameters. Many times I just either go off the canvas and then come back on the canvas, or go, if it's a taped piece like this, I go outside of the tape and then come back in, and the line or the shape is a lot more interesting. Now I need to add some of the dark. So I'm going in, this is straight black, but it's getting mixed with some of the whites that are not totally dry. And I love pattern. I always put some pattern in so that you can see the dots at the bottom. And I try to do three, I always think in threes, and I put a solid black in there, I put an open black shape, and then I put this pattern shape of all the little circles. So it gives, again, the variety. Now I'm going in with some paint that is thicker on the brush. So the first couple layers I did were very thin and just kind of washed. You saw the drips. Now as I get with each layer, I go between adding more thin layers and also beginning to add some thicker layers of paint. And then I didn't like that, so I just took my trowel and started going over it to mix it. Now I'm going on to some collage. And you can see that I have several of my restaurant trays that I have put several different pieces of collage on there that I thought might work when I'm in the middle of doing this neutral painting. It's just suggestions. So I put different things in there that I think might work, so they're right at my fingertips. I have so many collage papers that I couldn't possibly keep them all there. And I love those restaurant trays because you can just stack them up on top of each other to get them out of the way. Now I decided on doing the one with, I have papers with text, and I love that. It's the black and white. It's also pattern. The text is not supposed to mean anything. It's just it's the visual interest is what I like about it. So I do this in many of my paintings. And I hold it up like I do every collage piece and move it around the canvas to try to see where it looks best. And since overlapping is a way to give depth, I do that. I didn't want just that black shape to stay there without putting something over it. Now this is an interesting stage. I am putting a very light wash of raw umber mixed with white over the entire painting. And that is because I thought it was too white and it kind of makes it a little darker. Now, I mentioned this in the beginning of the video that I have a trick, and this is one of the tricks that I do to kind of make the whites a little bit darker. And the way I came up with this concept is my influence for all my abstract paintings has been old, worn, patinaed walls in New Orleans. And so I would do a layer and then I'd put one of the washes over, thinking that it was like dirt, you know, and then I'd do another layer, and then I'd do another layer of color and drawing and painting, and then I would put that light wash on top of it. Again, like a layer of dirt. And then I'd wipe it off. And it also is wonderful because part of it stays in some of the dried areas of the paint to give it some texture and some interest. So I'm taking each piece that I have on the tray and just holding it up and holding it around. And what's going through my mind is, where is the best place? And when I ask myself, where's the best place? That really means, do I want to bring your eye over here? Do I want to bring your eye over here? I want to make sure I don't have too many shapes that are the same color or the same space, or, you know, that are equidistant. So as I move it around, if there's something in my gut that tells me, oh, I like it here, and then I trust it, and that's what I go with. And for this one, I loved it in the bottom because I wanted to bring your eye down there on the bottom left corner. But I didn't want it to be too stark. I didn't want it to be too bold. So I basically just had something that was very similar in color to the background. Now I'm adding some writing. I love to add some writing with my China marker. And I really just look at my palette and try things out. You kind of, the painting starts talking to you, and it's like, oh, I don't have anything over here, or oh, I need something over here. Now I decided to put solid white on this one in a thick way so that it is contrast to the thinner washes that are on the background of the painting. So it's not only the thick paint, but the white, and even a drip in there. And again, there's an overlap on that black space, on that black shape, so that it doesn't look too stark. And this is one of the surprises I was telling you about in the beginning, or if I haven't mentioned it, this is a very cool tool. This is something I got at IKEA years and years ago. It's an old CD tray. And I look at everything as what the potential for mark making. So I use this a lot for lines. So I just put thick paint on the palette, and then I put the CD on top of it like a print, and then print it on the canvas. And what I decided to do is I wanted to push that piece of paper back and make it more interesting, so I put something on top of it. I'm just checking to see how my eye is moving around the canvas. This is toward the final end of the piece, so it works slower. I wanted something interesting in the top left there, so I just decided to do a thin wash of the raw umber mixed with white, and let it drip. And just to talk a little second about the drips, you have to decide where you want the drips and how long you want the drips. I don't just let it drip and have it take its course. It's very deliberate. It's a deliberate decision as to how long I want them, how many of them I want. So I definitely make that decision. It's not just haphazard. Can't decide. Keep trying. It kind of just comes in. It's like a camera coming into focus. It's like, yes, there's good. And if you decide later you don't like it or it doesn't work for you, you just paint over it or take it off. And just to remember where I put it, I put 2 little pencil marks as guidelines. Now, I would love for you to please leave a comment and let me know if you've ever done this before, where you put a piece of paper in the middle of another canvas and going over your own piece that you didn't like before. So, and if you have any questions about painting neutral paintings or subtle parts and contrasting concepts, I'd love to hear from you, and I answer every single question or comment personally. I decided I didn't like those drips, so I just took them out. Now I'm taking the tape off. You get to the reveal of the painting. So here's the final piece, and if you didn't notice already, I added a different color for basically the kind of the painted frame around the piece. And as we go in closer, you can see some of the writings and the layers that I did at first and the subtlety. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video.